Thank you so much, Brandon. Welcome, everybody. This is a great topic. And with us today, we have Andy Dale and Jessica Nguyen. And could you two please both introduce yourselves? You do a better job than I would do.
Go ahead, Jessica.
Uh, sure. Hi, everybody. I'm saying hello from the actually still sunny Seattle, Washington. I've already drinking my Starbucks for the day. I am the Chief Legal Officer of Lexion, which is currently a Series A startup in the legal technology space. And I joined the company as its first non-technical hire, and during the seed stage to basically help the founders who have a technical background run the company will wear so many different hats. I have a lot of perspective to share. But I was also invited to this session today because I was the first in-house legal hire at Avalara, which is back when it was a Series A/B company. I was the first legal hire at PayScale, an HR tech company, and that was more of a late-stage private company. I also have significant experience at a little company called Microsoft, and that gave perspective of how to build a company at large scale and how do we implement some of those best practices into a startup so that we can be successful long term. So that's my background. Andy?
Thanks. I'm Andy. I'm the General Counsel and Chief Privacy Officer at a company called Alice, which is a Series B B2B tech company in Boston. And I've been the first lawyer in 2 other times as well. So have some perspective to share. And I was at a bigger company, TD Ameritrade as well, and a bigger legal team. So I'm excited to be here.
That is wonderful. You two are both so perfectly chosen to be our panelists today. A little bit about me. I should introduce myself first. I'm a VP Investments at Mass Ventures. Mass Ventures is a seed and Series A venture capital firm based here in Boston. I have a background in material science and semiconductor equipment and nuclear detection. So I know nothing about being the first legal hire in any company, although I occasionally worked for companies that got big enough to make that first legal hire. So Andy, why don't we start with you? What are some business indicators that would signal a need for that first legal hire?
I think it's going to vary a bit based on the size and stage of the company, but um, and whether the company is B2C, B2B, has a sales force. So some of those things can impact whether that makes a good headcount addition of at a certain time in the company. But I think commonly, if it's a company that is sales focused, the indication should be when there are roughly 10 sales reps carrying a number and they need legal support from a commercial side to drive revenue. That's one indicator. And there are others that can come up if the company is different or is B2C or has a different orientation, or if there are IP issues in a certain company, maybe that can matter more if they're looking to bring someone in. But I think generally speaking, it's unsurprisingly revenue driven, and where the company is in the stage of its life cycle. Commercial being a really common entry point for that, and then I think additionally, sometimes it can be when the outside spend on outside counsel has gotten so pervasive or challenging in certain areas, there's no one left to manage it. When I came into DataZoo, it was a situation with a sales-driven company, and the controller was doing all the contracts. And so basically, my interview consisted of him just saying, "You'll do this, great." So it was definitely commercially driven, but I've seen other indicators as well.
That's really interesting. And I can see if the product was highly reliant on IP or highly reliant on complex contracts, or if there was an M&A policy, then that legal bill starts getting so big, and what you're saying, so complex. You've sort of squeezed everything you could get out of outside counsel, and now it's time to come in. And you're saying not only serve as inside counsel, but manage also outside counsel.
Totally. I think that's really a critical point. And one of the things that I've done when I've interviewed for roles is sat with the outside counsel spend and looked at it with whoever I'm, talking to about the role, and said, well, look at this. There's too much here. There's too little here. There's savings here. that's really valuable to somebody at an early stage to say, I'm going to take this over and I'm going to manage this and we're going to be more efficient. They love hearing that.
Oh, that sounds complicated. Finding that perfect person like you or Jessica that also can offer the strategic advice. So there's some hidden advice in there about when you're interviewing to make sure you ask these candidates, right, about their strategic decisions and how they go about making those strategic decisions. You know, you're talking about like the array. Jessica, I'm going to turn it over to you. This is sort of a similar question that I asked Andy, but on the other side of the coin. What are some of the mistakes that founders make before hiring that first counsel?
I think it's just overlooking the value of good operations, period. So what I have often seen is that founders who are very passionate about the mission, the product, delighting customers, you're also running a company. You have employees to take care of. You have finances to manage. And that's often overlooked because of the demographic and the profile of founders is generally, in my experience, very technical or even more commercial driven. But you know who's really good at operations? Legal, because we have Andy and I can have a unique perspective and role that we have to be immersed and fully integrated with every function of a company in our prior experiences, sales, marketing, product, every single one. So we're really well versed and very versatile. So one, I think it is overlooking operations is a common mistake, which then leads to under hiring for their first in-house legal hire, trying to go for cheapest talent and you get what you pay for. And then, right. And then I think secondly, is just you under hire and you try to solve for a pain point, which let's just say, B2B SaaS is one of my core expertise, just commercial contracting. And you're not implementing best practices, and then it leads to messiness, which could lead to a lower valuation and a less successful exit, as an example. If you're not have reasonable terms in your commercial agreements, and you're not sufficiently protecting your IP with your customers, your partners, or amongst your employees.
Yeah, for sure. Especially if you have any enterprise customers, but your contracts are just so complex and so deeply important. And I love that, Jessica. That's great, because really a key part about running a company or being a CEO is building that machinery to make sure that the operations is the machinery, to make sure
Yes.
that the company is a meta machine in itself. Back to you, Andy.
Can I add one thing to that? I think
For sure.
an additional thing that I've seen be challenging is IP creation. So where is the software being created and coded? Where in the world? Because in certain countries, right, there are different IP creation rules, and if you have an engineering team in a different location, it's pretty expensive to hire an entire engineering team in Boston. I think everybody would acknowledge that, and that's probably not scalable. So you're either going to be around the country or in another country, and not paying attention to the how easy or difficult it may be to ensure that your company owns that IP. To Jessica's point about what happens when you get diligenced for a funding or an exit, it's critical, absolutely critical, that you own the IP that your company is trying to derive value from. And I've seen that be a problem, and I've had to go back and fix it through every developer signing assignment agreements, even developers that are gone from the company. So it can be a big project ahead of an important company event.
It sounds pretty hard to go back and fix things.
Yeah. Lesson learned.
For sure. For sure. So what areas of law come up? You've touched on some. We touched on IP and contracts. I guess this question is for both of you. Like, what areas of law come up most often with startups, or is there an area?
I'm happy to start. Yeah, I would say, though, that it depends on your industry. If you are just generically B2B SaaS, I would hire a really good transactional lawyer who who's also just a really good generalist and has a strong familiarity with B2B SaaS operations. Because I think what a big mistake that a lot of founders make is they hire for knowledge and not enough for experience and judgment. So there's a lot of companies I could join where, for example, they think that I just need someone who has familiarity and proven experience in government contracting because that's our target buyer. Like for example, Andy and I, we can figure out government contracting. We can lean on outside counsel as needed. But what Andy and I can do that most specialists can't do is tell you how to be successful and build the company for the long term and our agility. At Lexion example, not only do I own legal and operations, I helped with product development, product counseling. I have built all their templates for across the business. I have built the employee handbook, the compensation plan for the sales organization, etc. The versatility and agility, how we can be leveraged, is much more valuable in-house for a startup than someone who has one little niche area. So I think sometimes, not all times, founders can over-index on a specialty skill versus the versatility of someone who has a good breadth of experience.
Yeah, this especially happens when a founder's looking for someone that's done a particular type of financing, whether that's an IPO or whether that's a private equity transaction or something, like over-indexing on that versus somebody that has been in your sector before or has relationships that exist in the sector before. I think that's undervalued. Like, legal can bring strategic partnerships to the table to solve critical issues with either direct competitors, which I've done before, or partnerships, or things that really move the needle, in terms of potentially the end state exit for the company. So I completely agree with the way you phrased that, Jessica. And as it happens at Alice, I have InfoSec, HR, and privacy and legal. And I didn't set out to do that, but we touch every aspect of the business. And I think if you prove, to your point, that you can be a trusted operator, then you can do more things.
Yeah, and you guys are talking about you're hitting on some really important qualities, I think, for any hire, but certainly at this sort of executive management level, which is flexibility and an ability to do strategic thinking. What other traits and skills should startup executives look for when looking to bring in their first in-house counsel? The question is to both of you, I guess. We'll start with Jessica.
I would say, a lot of legal personas are very risk averse, and their training, if they come from a law firm, is to be very a subject matter expert in an area of law, whether it be litigation or financing, etc., or M&A. I personally would look for someone who is very comfortable with embracing and doing and fully owning the unknown. So, hey, if our sales leader quits, I can just jump in and run the sales organization if I need to. Why? Because I understand sales metrics and how to, convert, think about pipeline and conversions, and can just jump in and own it. So that our CEO, who is very product focused, can focus on running the product and engineering team. Let me focus on that. So someone who is very open to embracing and doing the unknown and can learn very quickly. Because what I have learned are traits of any good executive, whether it be a good CEO or founder, are the people who are really good at asking questions, really good at active listening and listening to the responses they receive or the feedback they receive and acting on that. So when I see good product maturity, like business maturity and professional maturity, it's people who really ask questions, listen, and then act on that, not just think that they have all the answers. So similarly, those are traits that you should have in your general counsel or your first legal hire. Who's really good at that? So for me, if I had to run in and tomorrow run the marketing organization, I can, right? Because I just generally understand what are our goals? What are the metrics we're tracking to see if we're progressing toward those goals? Okay, what's working? What's not working? Why? I can dive in and do that. And I think those are, if you can find an in-house counsel hire like that and has that mindset, that growth mindset, I think those are very important skills.
For
Andy?
sure. Yeah. Andy, you want to
Yeah.
chime in on skills and traits?
Yeah, I think for the first hire in particular, I would look for someone that has at least some ideas about what the culture of legal should be. And so that means, in my view, in my opinion, somebody that's going to make legal accessible to people, is going to be available, is going to be present, is going to partner with the different departments, is going to want to
Mhm.
be in product meetings, is going to want to Jessica's point, understand all the different functions of the business, at least at a working level, to be able to contribute meaningfully to discussions, to get to the point where you want legal in the room contributing because they have a good point of view. And it doesn't have to be a legal issue. We get called in on all sorts of issues just for a take or a point of view or another set of eyes on something. And so I think that starts with culture, and that starts with legal being, we're here to help, we're here to accelerate the business, we're here to help you, put bluntly, get shit done, which is really important, really important in a startup.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And how do you find someone like you? You guys are great. How do founders find somebody like you?
I think they're everywhere, and I think about it probably in the context of hiring myself, like who I
Yeah.
have hired on our team. Like, what do I look for? It should be the same thing. It's will they understand the speed and pace of what we're trying to do? Will they be comfortable with that, or can they get comfortable with that, or can I help them get comfortable with that? And are they super curious? Because I think over the years I've learned that's probably the number one trait that I'm looking for, outside of maybe some core things that maybe somebody has done. You'll never find a unicorn. They just don't exist. So if you're looking for it, look for sort of skills and personality traits that fit the vibe that you're looking for and fit the company and will contribute at a cultural level, and then try to go from there with curiosity and with somebody that's going to dig in with teams to solve problems.
Yeah. And it's a funny question, Stacey. Earlier in my career, I found the startups. They didn't find me. They didn't think they needed me. So because they are so focused on product and revenue, and customer success and those metrics, which is completely normal. I'm on that side now. So I get it. So oftentimes I make the pitch, I do the outreach, and I say the value that I bring to the table and why they need me and what are the gaps I'm going to fill. So I think that's a signal of someone who's going to be a strong executor and will get shit done. I love that, Andy. Of someone who's the right persona for a startup, because you need that versatility and you need the executors. That's someone who's going to be like, here's what the law says. Now go. I don't know what you're going to do with that, but that's what the law says. No, Andy and I are going to come to the table, tell you what the law says, the solution we're recommending, and how it drives the business forward. That's what we're going to tell you. And also think 10 steps ahead. You may not be thinking about these things now, but here's why these things matter, so that when we have an exit, it's going to matter. If we're trying to grow to, this size of a company, it's going to matter. We can tell you that. Another way to networking, your VC, your investors will have a network. Our one of our key investors in Seattle is Madrona Venture Group. Well, we don't have a lot of VCs in Seattle, but they invested in a little company called Amazon and DocuSign. They did okay. So they oftentimes have an HR recruiting team internally at these VC firms, and they can help you with recruiting talent as well that their HR team has vetted. Yeah. So now I'm fully embedded in the Madrona ecosystem. If for some reason I'm no longer at Lexion, the Madrona HR team knows me, knows my strengths, knows my persona, and can match me with other portfolio companies.
Right. So the company's investor can help.
Yes.
Your investor can help you find in-house counsel. Yeah,
I'm sure you've played recruiter as well, Stacey, or matchmaker.
So we've talked about how important it is to having excellent operations, which is important for success. It's really important for big fundraising. It's really important for exits, big time. and just making sure all along that the IP is in good shape and et cetera, et cetera. But when you're hiring any person new in a small company and in a startup, everyone in a way needs to hit the ground running. So I guess what are some things like people should look for to, the CEO and the executive staff, the other executive staff should look for to know that it's a fit? Like what immediate value can legal bring that people can look for?
I think it's going to come down to that person being proactive about asking those questions a bit, and you'll know pretty quickly, are they gonna be that person or not? Because if there's curiosity, as I alluded to before, about the business model, and are they going out? One of the best pieces of advice I got from the CEO at DataZoo was stay close to the revenue, stay as close to the revenue as possible. And he meant, he was a former lawyer and had done strategic partnership deals and gotten into the commercial negotiation. That's really good advice from a strategic perspective. So if the person is exhibiting those types of characteristics, like, well, what are the commercial terms of this deal? Not just like, well, let me just look at the legal terms and hand it back to you, and here's a red line, and I'm on to the next one. I think those are some pretty good indicators. Am I curious about why are we doing this deal? What's the upside? What's the value for the company? I think those are the kinds of questions that kind of give you the heads up. All right, this person can potentially scale with us.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Andy, that's great. I think I would just add is obviously needs and priorities are going to vary by the organization, by industry, size, and stage. I will say with any executive hire, I've been involved at Lexion directly with hiring and onboarding our sales and marketing exec. And it's given me a lot of insight as to when when is a good time and what value any new executive hire can bring to the table is look at in the first week, you'll know they'll have a plan. The ones who are good will say, these are the gaps I've learned and seen within a week. Here's the low hanging fruit. Let me fix this. And here's why we need it. So there's that. Andy, I also love being commercially driven as well. At PayScale, one of our winning professional highlights, they're a late stage company. So obviously different than most startups. But I will say the stay close to revenue is really important. And so again, if legal is involved with driving revenue, how so? What are the friction points in that revenue cycle that's causing slowdown or a lower ACV or lowering our competitive win rates? So a very clear anecdote is at PayScale, I was their first in-house legal hire. They had trouble closing enterprise deals, not shocking, right? Because the process with enterprise is very hairy. And with no product updates, no change to sales leadership or training, PayScale had a 25% year-over-year improvement in closing enterprise segment deals because of the maturity me and the legal team brought into being able to close those enterprise deals because they were solely reliant on outside counsel, and outside counsel can't really advise and moving the deal along. Like they're not telling you what the risk. They'll just mark up everything and slow down the sales cycle. That's their job, though, right? To highlight every single legal risk, and that was really slowing down the sales cycle for that organization. And bringing someone in-house with business expertise really accelerated it.
That's amazing. That's a big change. And
yeah, that's real money in the enterprise segment.
Yeah, wow, that's a big change in revenue. Are there any questions from the audience?
Yeah, actually,
Brandon.
We had a few questions from the audience, from the virtual audience, and I'll walk around and see if anyone in the room has any questions as well. But I did want to ask Stacy, actually you in particular. So I know what Andy and Jessica are probably going to say, but you're starting to see a lot of startups potentially bring in mentors or advisors that have a legal background as a way to kind of skirt around the hiring of a first lawyer or first attorney, not so much to get the legal advice, but maybe the potential opinion, because obviously it comes with that caveat every time. So you at Mass Ventures and your team, are you seeing that as a benefit as you're thinking about, potentially investing in a startup if there's some sort of legal makeup on their board or in their advisor network, especially in a highly regulated type of industry at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. All the teams that we work with have obviously a business lawyer and then they usually have a separate IP. And so the business, that outside counsel is always at board meetings, things like that. I have not seen, I haven't been in venture long enough, frankly, to see companies grow that big where they're bringing it in-house. And I'm trying to, here there's so much biotech. Usually it's more like a clinical specialist. I'm trying to think of anyone, but if they had it on their advisory team, I'm sure I've seen it. I just don't have a photographic memory. I think it would make a very positive impression. The same with you, I assume, right?
Yeah, well, very similar. Just then the question when you go to someone like Jessica or Andy is every conversation you have with that advisor or mentor has to have a disclaimer set at first, being like, you're not maybe a paying client yet, right? I am volunteering time and therefore this is not my legal opinion. But I don't know if that's something that either Andy or Jessica has experienced in real life or knows anyone in their network that is an advisor or a mentor to a lot of startups and has to deal with that kind of situation.
I could speak to it a little bit. I'm an advisor for 3 companies. So, point. You made the point. I think it's happening more, and it's 2 of those companies are sort of data privacy focused, and so I'm not really giving them hardcore product development counseling and advice about their platform. It's more like, these are the trends that are happening in the United States. This is what we're seeing in Europe, and this is how you should approach building a product, and this is how you should approach a feature that's data rich or data heavy. And if you're going to consider whether you have a data asset or you're just kind of acting as a service provider around that data asset, those are the kinds of things that you're not providing them direct legal advice. You're giving them business advice, and you're advising them in kind of strategy. And then we connect them to outside counsel. I think that really is what's helpful, is where do you need to spend money? All right, well, you need to spend money in IP. Then here's a good person at a price point that makes sense for where the company is to go spend that money. Don't spend that money at a huge law firm unless, to the earlier point, like in your corporate financing, you probably should, spend a different kind of spend category than maybe others, and then give them that kind of advice.
Got it. Okay. And then one question that came through is do you know of any networks or associations that can have almost like a contract to hire situation for attorneys, where, especially for early stage startups that may not have the funds to hire a full-time, fractional attorney? Exactly. Some of those networks that offer that contract to hire situation, whether it's in New England or has now that we're in a remote work environment, a remote aspect to them. Maybe Jessica, you want to start with this one?
Yeah, I don't know of a single organization that has, but I do know a lot of individuals who are former general counsels who now are just fractional GCs for a lot of small companies. So again, it'd be reaching out to your network and asking, hey, network, do you know, you can reach out to me and Andy now, you know us. Do you know any great fractional GCs? Also, your investor may also know some fractional GCs who are former GCs of their portfolio companies. So I think there's a lot of individuals who are fractional GCs.
I think it works in some aspects of the business and less in others. I think a fractional GC is sort of, it's an almost anathema in some ways, because I believe that you have to dig in really deeply with the business to be a really effective GC, and they just don't have the time to spend, doing that necessarily. So I think it makes sense on the commercial side, if somebody's going to be doing all your sales deals or all your vendor contracts, and you can get them up to speed on your business and get them into your Slack channels, and you can get them communicating with the business. But I don't think that's going to work, for example, on like a heavy duty corporate financing issue or a really complex set of data focused issues. I think you probably need a specialized outside counsel just to kind of help you on those issues specifically.
I know in the Boston community alone, there's a lot of accelerators that startups can take advantage of. And within that network, usually we'll have these different institutions coming in, doing, these office hours, so to speak, spending 4 to 8 hours a day with these startups, whatever, industry agnostic sometimes. And it's a way, I know for the the legal firms that come through, it's a way for them to potentially find new budding clients down the road as they go through different stages of funding and growth. But are you seeing that become more prevalent in the New England area? I don't know if your particular firms do something like that, because that is one way we're seeing a lot of startups kind of gravitate towards certain names, or remember, we're seeing much more of a relationship build as opposed to, oh, this is the premier brand name we know in this region.
I do see that even in the Northwest, these law firms partnering with various incubators or accelerators to be the go-to subject matter expert. And for them, where they make revenue and money is if they're involved with the event, the financing, the acquisition, etc. So that's what they're trying to become, is a trusted advisor. And once they are owning your incorporation documents and own all of your securities management, it's just easy and no-brainer to leverage that same firm if there is an event, because the diligence room and the diligence exercise will be very streamlined and easy. And oftentimes they're very good and they know market terms for various financing and M&A documentation. So that there's also really great. What those firms often though lack is actual experience though in being in-house legal. So the perspective that an Andy or myself would bring to the table is very different than someone who's really good at processing a financing transaction. So a very different type of expertise.
I think to add to that, if there are people that are showing up sort of at accelerators and helping founders, that's really beneficial. But I would also say the flip side to that is the firms that, particularly in the Boston area, there's a few that are just really good at venture financing and really good at managing strategically through the exit process. So they won't charge a lot of money in the early going because of what Jessica just mentioned. They want to be around for the exit. And that exit can be, $1 million or more for their firm. So like the truth is they're going to invest their time up front to get to know the founder, and they're not going to charge you to onboard them as a client. And I think you're probably better off trying to seek out the folks that have been there, done that, for that early strategic advice, because they haven't been in-house, to your point, Jessica, but they can help you avoid early pitfalls. And then when you're ready to hire a GC, they know exactly who you should hire. And, in addition to other sources, your investors may have folks they've worked with before, but that outside counsel is also going to be tremendous for helping you find someone that fits.
So I want to see if there's anyone in the crowd who, yep, just easier for them to hear you.
Hi there. Oh boy, that's loud. Thanks very much, everybody, for the useful information. I'm curious, how do you evaluate outside counsel when you come into a company, and how do you look at their current counsel, whether or not they should change counsel, the job counsel's doing, et cetera?
That's a really good question. You want to go first, Jessica?
Sure, I'll start. I get a lay of the land. Who are we using and what are we using them for? I don't think you need big law and big law rates for every type of work. For low value commercial transactions, one, can I bring that in-house, automate it? Or can I use a seasoned solo practitioner who charges the rates of a junior associate at a big law firm? So that's how I evaluate it, is what are the law firms we're using and what are we using them for? And is that optimized for the company?
I agree. The right tool for the right job. But the one caveat would be the firms that are, as I alluded to before, are going to help with the financing and potentially be working with the board of directors with you. I want to pick that firm. So it may be they're working with somebody that they've worked with in the past, and I'm going to spend time with that firm and really make sure that they understand that we're partnering together, because that becomes your relationship, and that's not going to be the CEO's relationship forever. That's the GC's relationship, and you want to make sure that's really a tight one.
I do it. So I guess, how do you, with that idea of maybe you go through your investor network or your board's network to find the right GC or the first attorney, but how do you kind of combat that or balance that with this idea of, So this person already has a relationship with a lot of people that you have in-house. Would it be beneficial to get someone who doesn't have that relationship, that might offer a different perspective, might not be in the same camp, and therefore you don't have this kind of, you don't start amassing this majority of thought around one similar mindset? Does that make sense? Am I explaining that correctly?
With the outside firm or with?
So I guess, by through this referral network that obviously a lot of general counsel operates off of, whether it's with wealth managers, board advisors, investors, and what have you, you see this kind of handshake deals going across where, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. Is that something that you want to steer into as a founder, do you think? Or do you want to steer away from that and have a more diversity of opinion based on the fact that they don't have these existing relationships already set?
I think it's up to that GC and that founder to establish their own trust and their own relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so that referral can come from an investor, but they're going to start working for you. So that's their job in your company. And that CEO is going to be the one that they're talking to about what their equity stake in the company is. And so that relationship, at least I'm speaking for me, like I wouldn't join a company whereby that relationship wasn't the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
The referral is great, but that relationship in the company is so important.
Yeah, I mentioned referral now because of the stage of my career and what my relationship is now, where I need to be less doing personal outreach as I did 12 years ago at Avalara. But with that said, the reality is the investment team, they're not going to really, for your first in-house legal hire, they're unlikely to force upon you a certain person. If you reach out to them for help, they will help you to the extent they can. But I was, for Avalara and PayScale, I was not a recommendation from the investors. I had reached out through my personal network, through someone who knew the CFO, etc., that I got became the first in-house legal hire. With that said, even if down the road I was an introduction or referral from Madrona Venture Group or Coastal Ventures into one of their portfolio companies, as Andy said, I'm experienced enough now to know whether I'm a fit for the company and for the executive team. And we're going to work well together because we're going to have to trust one another. And that may not be a fit, and that's okay. And I would respectfully decline that role. So I wouldn't take the role if I didn't think it was a fit either. That's not good for anybody.
Anyone else in the room here have any questions? Right now. So I was wondering on top of that. So if I'm hiring my first general counsel, I guess as me as a founder, I'm thinking, where am I in the pecking order of your client list at that point? I mean, how many startups could you be working with at that time? And how would I know as a founder if I am a priority? Obviously, you would have a lot of clients going on at that time. So how should I traverse that area?
Well, I mean, we're both internal.
Yeah, we're both internal. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, we're both internal, dedicated to one company. So we don't have law firms, and I don't have multiple clients. I have one, and that's the appeal to me, is the one client. So it's like any other exec hire or any other hire at any level. You just best fit.
Yeah. I would recommend a fractional GC who only limits themselves to how many clients they take on, and you can negotiate upfront how many hours you have and how many clients they have as well. And they're going to probably want a comp structure that has some equity component to it as well. I will say, though, alternatively, if you want a full-time dedicated person like an Andy and I, think about, maybe I don't need a 100% legal person, but can Andy and Jessica fill other gaps? So can, they step in? So one of the things I do at Lexion is I helped with product roadmap. I help with, marketing content. I helped do thought leadership and accelerated brand awareness, etc. So can they do other functions other than legal? Because for any startup, you may not have a 40-hour-a-week job for an in-house lawyer at the time.
That's a really good point. You can bring someone in earlier than you think, because with all of your know-how, you can fill a lot of roles.
I wrote V1 version of all of our customer support docs. I mean, and then we're generally smart and good writers. We write, content.
I don't know if you're good writers.
Ah!
I don't know about that.
I've
And
had
I have
to
an
learn how to
engineering degree. So.
Canva. We've had to learn.
Teasing. I'm teasing.
Oh no.
More questions. Are there more questions? How are we on time, Brandon?
We're good. We're getting right up against the hour here, so this is perfect timing. Most of the questions that are coming through the feed are asking for specific legal advice, which I know won't be answered on here because it's not
I don't
appropriate.
think. Yeah.
So I'm not gonna ask those questions here.
Specific.
But I guess the best way, how should they potentially, whether it's reaching out to you, Andy, or you, Jessica, or anyone in your network, these founders that are asking these specific questions, how can they get in your network to find the right person to hire as that first attorney?
Yeah, I'm happy to help. I'll put my email in the chat, but you can also reach me on LinkedIn if you want.
Yep. I recommend connecting with me on LinkedIn and having an ask, a very clear ask. Hey, can you connect with someone who is interested in being your fractional GC or who has this particular subject matter expertise? Because I'm trying to grow a company in financial services or healthcare. Those are all very regulated and specialized areas.